Hello, everybody. It is episode 127 of Recotopia. My name is Chris Atkinson, joined by Aaron Dicer.
Handily ho, Caesarinos.
Oh, there you go. That's what we're talking about. That's the good stuff. Today's big recommend is Hail Caesar, a Coen Brothers movie. I think it's our second. Maybe our I don't know. If
I think I put Inside Llewyn Davis on here as a big recommend at one point.
Three of them. And so there you go. Coen Brothers they have a long list of these types of movies, I feel like.
Yeah.
But would also like to welcome chat who have come out here to watch us talk about movies here on a Tuesday. We appreciate you guys coming out. Aaron, do you have any small recommends?
Oh, but of course I do. And it's going to get interesting with the first one because I am recommending Trap. This is M. Night's latest movie. Ostensibly an excuse for him to do a music documentary about his daughter. And I think he said as much. That's not me. Yeah. I think he's literally said, this was just a great excuse to bring a lot of attention to my daughter's music career.
He can't hide that. He knows he can't.
No, he cannot. So, yeah, I actually had a really good time with this movie, despite being aware of all the reasons people will hate this movie. I had a blast. I think Josh Hartnett is really fun in this, and you're going to hear that word a lot as I talk about the movie, because I just thought it was fun. I just thought it was a really fun experience. I think the Lady Raven character, his daughter, her name is Seleka. I can't remember which, but I thought she was fine. Ariel Donahue, who plays the girl in this, I haven't really seen her much. I thought she did a good job. Of course, everybody is acting under the M. Night umbrella, which is almost a different kind of acting anymore. It reminds me of the discussions that were had about like the prequels and how George Lucas directs actors to have a certain kind of different presence when they deliver their lines, because M. Night kind of falls into that a little bit. But it's just it's an interesting, one day story of this absolutely insane FBI sting operation that makes no sense, but is a lot of fun to watch the battle of the minds between Cooper, the Josh Hartnett character, and Haley Mills stepping in as the FBI, or not, I guess technically not in the FBI. I think she was a profiler who was working with the FBI to capture him. So I'm not going to give anything away about it, but I did have a good time despite my CinemaSins brain being very active, especially during the third act.
Yeah. This is going to be one of those that's going to have like 300 sins to weed out once we get whatever. But yeah, I watched this, and by the way, Haley Mills in a movie called The Parent Trap and Trap now. That's pretty awesome. Josh Hartnett's kind of had a career renaissance. Oppenheimer, I think, kick-started that more than anything, although Wrath of Man may have been a good one for him too. But man, I loved Trap for a while. And then the third act, and I wish I could tell you why the third act of this movie ruins it for me, but it also would ruin it for you guys if you're wanting to watch the movie. So I don't want to tell you what happens there, but I was actually enjoying it. This movie is really This Works, the movie, for a real and all the typical M. Night, people saying things weirdly to each other and all that. I actually was down with all of it. But then the third act came, and I was like, nope. Now you
can't do it.
You
Too
just
far.
Lost me. Yeah, you just lost me. So yeah, I really wanted to. I was sitting there going, I'm actually loving this. How is this possible? And then it just zoomed on down for me.
It's interesting too, because I most M. Night movies are a little over the top, not just with the acting and the stuff that's going on, but also with the themes and the messages. I think of Old, like the way characters will say things about, when you were young, and they're looking through, photos of when they were young in the car. Like, he just lays on thick the thematic stuff. And it's kind of missing in this movie a little bit until the third act. And I think that's really interesting, because I think the third act is supposed to bring home ideas of, what is family to somebody like Cooper. I think those are the things he's trying to distinguish between. And I don't know if because that stuff didn't work as much for me as usual in an M. Night movie that I was able to even more just kind of let my guard down and just have a good time with the silliness of it all.
Yeah.
But I just didn't find myself too concerned about that. And I think at some point you just go, okay, I'm just along for the ride or not. And I think you got off the ride at the point where most people will get off the ride, where it's just like my brain cannot handle the decisions that the human beings are making in this third act.
Yeah, and if you wanted to do, I mean, I feel like if you wanted to do that third act, you needed to kind of like seed that a little bit better
I agree.
as well.
I agree.
So anyway, I think it's, I don't begrudge anybody for hating, loving this movie. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those type of things where, it's got a lot going for it. So have some fun with it. Don't worry about anything else.
Yep.
All right. I have been kind of like picking up on some movies that I missed back in the day that I've always heard about. Like a few months ago, I did 6 Degrees of Separation. I hadn't seen that movie, even though it had been in my mind for years. Another one that had been in my mind for years was Secrets and Lies. A Mike Lee movie that came out, and it got nominated for quite a few Oscars back in the day. The sort of the short story of this is that Marianne Jean-Baptiste is this woman whose mother has died, but we found out that she was adopted, and now she's looking for her biological mother. And the records state that it's this person that she has to, that I guess there's laws now that say you can go and find the biological mother if you want to, and it's undeniable that Marianne Jean-Baptiste is black, and her mother, that the records say that is her biological mother, is white. And so there's this whole thing like going, well, is this did they mess up the records, or is there something that we're not being told here? Cynthia is being played by Brenda Blethyn in a great performance. It's just someone who is so sweet all the way throughout, and just like an emotional wreck when she gets a call from her daughter that she didn't realize was still out there and everything. Meanwhile, she has an actual other daughter that she's has this kind of like terrible existence with, where she, her daughter doesn't really respect her mother, and they're just kind of like in this constant arguing state and everything. But and then Brenda Blethyn also has a brother played by Timothy Spall, and he's married to some woman who hates Cynthia. And so there's a little thing going on with them. There's a secret that they have that I think you can guess pretty quickly. I don't know if it's one of those things where they back in the 90s you didn't talk about this type of stuff, but I don't know, it was pretty easy to guess. I don't know if they were trying to make it a big surprise by the end of it, but they aren't telling people what their secret is. Anyway, Marianne Jean-Baptiste ends up calling Cynthia, and they start kind of very slowly hitting it off after a very emotional time period of getting to know each other. And so the question becomes, does she introduce this long lost daughter to her family, who will not understand any of this once that happens? And that's what this movie is leading up to, this big barbecue that they're going to have for a birthday party. This movie is fantastic. Oh my God. Nice. I can't believe that I let this one go for so long, but I think this was a movie that I tried to find on streaming. It might be on streaming now, but I ended up ordering a Region B Blu-ray for this thing, and I had to watch it on one of my region-free Blu-ray players. So anyway, great movie. Highly recommend if you can find it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it immediately on my list. I've never seen it. In fact, I'm adding it to my Letterboxd list as we speak because that sounds amazing, and I love Baptiste. Broadchurch was where I think I fell in love with her as an actor. But she's had a sneaky career. Like, she's been in a ton of stuff, and so I'm excited to see this. I'm glad you brought brought it to my
H says
attention.
it's on Max, which at the time that I bought this, I actually have had this for a really long time. Max was not a thing, so so there you go.
Yeah.
Ordered a Blu-ray that is, that then the streaming services took over and are showing the movie now. So there you go.
My second small recommend is a very strange one. I've recently come back from a family vacation with my kids, and they always introduce me to cool stuff when we're together. And this is an artist named Steve Cruikshank. This is a musical artist, but the concept that they introduced me to is the concept of negative harmony. Now, if you've never heard of negative harmony, it's basically taking the harmonies of a song and inverting the keys based on some sort of baseline, average baseline of the notes. So that's the simplest way I can say it, mainly because I don't really understand it. But that is as simple as I understand what negative harmony is. Well, Steve Cruikshank has kind of made a career lately on like Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever you listen to your stuff, on doing negative harmony covers of famous harmonic songs. So the most interesting one to listen to immediately is Bohemian Rhapsody. Listen to the negative. You could even just search negative harmony Bohemian Rhapsody and you'll see his version because he's pretty much the one that's doing these. And it is a fascinating listen because the song is completely different, but it still kind of works, but it gives it a different feeling and tone based on the way, notes are resolving and chords are happening. I think if for no other reason than even just an experimental listen, you're going to enjoy listening to some of his negative harmony covers. But if you are like, if you've ever taken music theory or you're big into music and that kind of stuff, I think this kind of stuff's going to be really fascinating to you. So yeah, just look up negative harmony, Bohemian Rhapsody, Steve Cruikshank if you want to search for him specifically. But it's really cool stuff.
So he's like kind of got a YouTube or an Instagram or something like that?
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on the music providers, like if you have Spotify or YouTube Music or whatever. But yeah, if you do a search for his name or negative harmony, Bohemian Rhapsody. Another one I listened to is Sounds of Silence. I thought was really interesting. The Simon Garfunkel one. So he's also not singing these covers. He's taking the original, I believe, if I'm understanding it correctly, the original Freddie Mercury, Simon and Garfunkel vocals, and then modulating them to the negative harmony. So it's a really interesting one.
I'm definitely going to take a look at this. I love any time that people take existing art and turn it into something new like that, or look at it in a different way than you haven't thought of before. So I think that would be really, really cool.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm gonna take a look at this later on today. In fact. All right, my next recommend is Adaptation from 2002. This is the second collaboration between writer Charlie Kaufman and director Spike Jonze after being John Malkovich. I've seen this movie a couple of times over the years, but it was time for a revisit. And yeah, this movie holds up so well. It's so good. And I feel like it's almost something only Charlie Kaufman could do, really. The idea that he takes in reality and then mixes it in with fiction and everything. This is I can't remember how real the story behind the story was, but the idea was to adapt a novel from this writer Susan Orlean, who Meryl Streep plays in the movie, and adapt that novel into a movie. And Charlie Kaufman is played by Nicolas Cage in this. And they have scenes at the very beginning where he's on the set of Being John Malkovich, and there's like John Cusack and Catherine Keener show up and all that. And we see Charlie Kaufman as this guy who people really respect and love, but they don't like being around because he's always a sad sack and he's boring and whatever. and he's got a twin brother who, of course, Charlie Kaufman completely invented for this movie, but somehow got a credit for him on the screenplay on this on this movie. Nicolas Cage playing two different characters who are so distinctly apart that it's I think I didn't look at the whole list of people who were nominated that year, but probably should have won an Oscar. I mean, I think he did get nominated for this, but the whole thing is about him trying to adapt this novel that's not really, it's based on this I think it's a New Yorker article or whatever, and Meryl Streep plays Susan Orlean, goes to Florida, meets this person played by Chris Cooper, who goes around to swamps and is like stealing orchids and things of that nature, and knows a lot about flowers and knows a lot about this and that and whatever. And that was what that story was initially about. Meanwhile, Kaufman is trying to adapt this into a movie, and he's getting all these ideas about how we can make this exciting and everything. But it's really about his writer's block all the way through that, and him being unable to adapt this type of thing. And of course, adaptation has multiple meanings throughout this movie, whatever you want to go through. It's a very well named movie. But if you've never seen adaptation, do yourself a favor. And during this period of time, during this 2000s period of time when The Wicker Man came out, a lot of people were really down on Nicolas Cage and said, well, he's in nothing but terrible movies. 4 years prior was in this movie and was in several movies during the time of Wicker Man that were actually very, very good. Matchstick Men and Lord of War and all these type of things were going on during the time. So, but yes, this is a fantastic, fantastic movie. I may even like this more than Being John Malkovich, even though I love that one. I put that in high esteem too. So yeah, there you go. Adaptation.
I do love this more than Being John Malkovich. I do love them both. Yeah, this is one of my favorite movies. I think Kaufman he's just so interesting in how he is able to be meta, but not let the emotion of the movie get away from him. So when he writes something, and of course Spike Jonze is a big part of that as well. But yeah, it is autobiographical in many ways. He literally says the movie was written by Donald Kaufman and dedicates it to him, in a wink to that. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing movie. And I did look it up. Chris Cooper did win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for this movie. And Nicholas and Meryl were both nominated, as was Charlie Kaufman for the script. So it did get 4 nominations. So
yeah, I can't remember who won over him, but anyways, this is one of those where you look at it and like, who beat this? Who beat this performance? But yeah, a fantastic movie that all of you guys should take a look at sometime. Okay, on to our big recommend. And Aaron, this is your big recommend, so take it away.
2016's Hail Caesar is the 19th Coen Brothers film. It is set in 1950s Hollywood, starring plenty of people you know, and also many fake movies you'll wish you could actually see. The movie starts as an angelic choir sings us through the opening logos and directly into a broken-up Josh Brolin, lamenting that he's lied to his wife about his tobacco habits as he sits in confession. We then begin some glorious Michael Gambon-eration about this Eddie Mannix and his job as a studio head and fixer. We get to see Mannix in action immediately as he interrupts what's called a French postcard situation and smooths it all over with a few slaps of an actress, a fake name, and a bribe of a few cops. Gambon then narrates us into the story of Rome as the Coens play Wes Anderson, and where a very Clooney-like Caesar overacts his part in the titular movie, the titular in-movie, I should say, in Saul of Tarsus encounters a divine presence to be shot later. We find out Mannix is watching some early assembly work of this movie and they would like some clerics of all faiths to come in and give a look-see. Next up, we see Mannix on a call looking for an actor for a different picture, a classy picture. He's talked into snagging Hobie Doyle for the role, a Western wonderkind with the horse skills of Roy Rogers and the looks of Alden Ehrenreich. Cut to a nervous Newman Nedry dropping something in a Roman chalice instead of following his instructions to recline with his lyre. Instructions, by the way, given by the very underappreciated Kyle Bornheimer, who I love, who is one of many amazing that guys in this movie that only have a line or two. Clooney is on set now as actor Barrett Whitlock, and I really do love the names in this script as well. Just great names. As he grabs the aforementioned chalice, he plays a wonderful game of Will He Drink It? Before chugging the entire goblet, leaving the set ill, and then later passing out into the arms of his poisoners. Next up, a priest, a rabbi, and a minister walk into a room. But instead of a punchline, it's just Mannix trying to make sure his movie isn't going to offend a single human ever. After one of the various clergymen decides to be excellent at chariot sins, we're treated to an amazing meeting of the religious minds on what is and isn't deity and how it should be portrayed on film. Back to Hobie now, who's told the studio is changing his image. So he leaves his plate of beans to go to a soundstage and dress up in a tux. Meanwhile, Black Widow does her best Aquaman impersonation as actor Deanna Moran, but she is clearly ticked off about having to wear the mermaid tail and hinting at why it might not be fitting as good as it usually had. We now cut back to Hobie doing a scene for Lawrence Lorenz, who, in only the way that Ralph Fiennes can, requests a mirthless chuckle and finds complete exasperation as Hobie is clearly so over his skis that he's trippingly over every line. And absolutely nothing comes simple for him. Oh, but would that it were. Meanwhile, the kidnapped Caesar has been taken to a beach villa, and Mannix is now trying to figure out how to shoot around him being missing. Lorenz, who's fine with you using his Christian name Lawrence, by the way, is still in a huff and wants Eddie to cut Hobie, but Mannix has to leave for a lunch date that appears to have been cut from Nolan's Oppenheimer and added in here. Back at the kidnapping mansion, Whitlock wakes up and finds his way into a room of strange men who apparently don't want crusts on their sandwiches, are studying history and economics, have hired a very intrusive photographer, and are very well read. After Mannix receives a ransom note, he's interrupted by both Thora Thacker and her twin sister Thessaly Thacker, who want to discuss possible stories they might run and why they both look so much like Tilda Swinton. Meanwhile, Hobie has dropped by to discuss things, and Mannix spills the aforementioned beans to him about the kidnapping. And lo and behold, Hobie's actually got some street smarts here and points out that the extras might be good suspects before Mannix heads out with the $100,000 to pay the ransom. But not before we get a Channing Tatum number as Bert Gurney doing some tap dancing and singing a cheeky lament to the lack of dames that will be present in his life when he ships out. But on the positive side, at least the songwriter knew the actual plural for octopus is octopuses and not octopi. Baird, meanwhile, is getting deeper lessons on communism and seems to be having a good time being supremely impressionable. Next up, it's back to some Mannix genius as he's planning for Deanna Moran's unplanned pregnancy. His idea? Have her adopt her own child. Genius! Mannix then heads to see some Merrily We Dance dailies where editor Francis McDormand knows how to run the projector, but not how to avoid wearing scarves to work. Also, I'm pretty sure that film burnt out, so I'm kind of confused how putting it in reverse unmelted it, but the resulting It's Complicated joke is worth it, so all is forgiven. Fair enough. Back to Hobie, who's going to pick up Carlotta as he is her studio-mandated mandate. He then passes the time waiting by doing some rope tricks that I'm sure he learned in his days in the rodeo. Mannix, meanwhile, heads home to have a meal, tuck in his kids, put some bribery planes from Lockheed on the shelf, and avoid his wife's questions about his smoking. Then it's on to more Hobie and Carlotta, who are getting along pretty well at the premiere of Hobie's movie, Lazy Ol' Moon. A brief interaction with studio personhood stand-in Jonah Hill, who's bonded, by the way, and a realization that Scarlett Johansson is super thirsty for a man with good stampin' forearms.
That's right.
Eventually, we're back with Hobie and Carlotta's date, but the spaghetti wrangling is interrupted as Hobie sees Channing Tatum's Bert Gurney with the briefcase he knows is full of ransom money. So Hobie follows him to the kidnapped beach house, which apparently also belongs to Bert, who's leading his fellow Hollywood commies out to sea to hunt for the Red October so he and his puppy can escape to Russia with or without the actual ransom money. We then briefly wonder what Jesus might want for breakfast and if he's an extra or a primary. After that, Hobie takes Baird back to Mannix at the studio so he can slap the socialism out of him and get him back to work before handling Thora's possible On Wings of Eagles piece about how exactly Baird got that job by telling her that her source, Bert Gurney, just left town on a communist sub. In his final interaction with Christ on the cross, Baird absolutely nails, pun intended, everything about his final monologue except for that whole faith part. Yep. And so we end where we began just over a single day later, with Mannix in confession trying to figure out what's right and where his purpose is. But as a new day dawns on Michael Gambone's voice, we're assured that Mannix has found his stride again and has decided he will not be making any bombs. At least not the exploding kind. And that is Hail Caesar. Chris, what did you think this time through?
Yeah, first time I liked it. Second time I love it. I love it now. It's weird to me that this one, I always try to figure out why certain movies, especially when they're by the same people, like The Big Lebowski and Burn After Reading, both of them did bomb at the box office and now have huge cult followings. Of course, Big Lebowski has gotten to the point where it has its own conventions and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
And meanwhile, something like Hail Caesar, which does everything Coen Brothers movies do well, has not become this kind. Now, I guess I have over the years run into people who love Hail Caesar, but it hasn't had quite that same lasting power as those other two movies. And this one, maybe it's because it's the era and it's really hard to get steeped into the 1950s and like what they're doing in those things, because they're all based in like real things that they were making back in the 50s. You know, like the Scarlett Johansson character is based on a real person, a real actress. So like was it the Buzzley Berkeley musicals? And all
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But they're all doing movies that were done back in the day. But just taking a look at some of my my notes here. I love that it drops us straight into the action. Movie it kind of skews confusing at first because you're like, who are these characters? What is this going on? But that's fairly easy to follow after about 10 minutes. Like, you just have to keep track of some names. But luckily those names get, like, they meet those people like in the next scene. It's not like one of those things where they mention somebody and then it's like 50 minutes later you're like, oh, you may remember the person we brought up at the beginning of the movie. It doesn't do that, so it's pretty easy to follow. Mannix's very first thing he does sets the theme, I think, for this whole thing, because everything is about image, covering for and counseling stars and directors whenever something may damage the studio's reputation. And most of this has to do with sexual situations. It's either photos at the beginning of the movie, out of wedlock pregnancies, cheating on spouses, and of course rumors of homosexuality. All of those things are things that are fires he has to put out throughout this whole thing. And it just is immediately kinetic movie when it goes into this thing. It doesn't really stop to really set anything in motion. You're just like, all right, I'm on for the ride. And this is something the Coen Brothers do really well. They did it in The Big Lebowski as well. They did the exact same thing. I love watching the Hobie Doyle thing where he's shooting a Western and then they need him back at the studio because they're changing his image. And Hobie just kind of accepts it without a single question. He's like, we're going to change your image. And he's like, all right. And then he goes back to the studio. But I love how you see how his character actually does transform as the movie goes on, because, the first thing we see, he's completely out of his element going into that stuffy movie based on a play that's got all these these words that are like, it's funny because Ray Fiennes is sitting there trying to get him to do he's trying to get him the mirthful laugh, and like he has to pretend like he knows what that means. And so, he goes in as acting is ridiculously stiff and just not working at all. But as it goes on, you see him, he's kind of got more to him than just a dumb Hollywood actor, because I love the part later when he's talking to Josh Brolin and Brolin's like, we don't know who kidnapped these guys and whatever. And he's like, who I'd look into? I'd look into the extras. Cause all the people that you see every day, the crew and all them, you see them, hey, that's Jim. He does the lights or whatever. And then, but the extras, you don't know them. You don't know what they're up to. And he's exactly right about that. So the would that it were so simple scene is just dynamite.
It's glorious.
That whole thing. And I think it would work without all the stuff leading up to it, but it so much leads up to that scene because you have the mirthful laugh and the fact that Lawrence Lorenz, because he keeps saying Lawrence, and then he's like Lorenz, and then finally he says Lorenz, and he's like, it's Lawrence. We can go by for but like all these different words, and I think even the line, this is not even a line I think is meant to be funny, but I think the actress's line in there where she says, "Come over here and sit next to me on the divan," like nobody calls it a divan. Like this is you can tell this is one of those plays or whatever where there's and it's a pretentious thing being directed by a pretentious director, and it's so funny seeing a guy who just came off of a Western go on to that set. That is just amazing. Ray Fiennes going into Josh Brolin's office and saying, Lawrence Lorenz presents. That's always been the thing that we've been doing. Love that too. I love that scene where Brolin has all the religious figures in the room. And it was funny to me that you said there is no punchline because you started it off like one of those classic rabbi and priest.
Yep.
But it has a dynamite punchline.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
The thing is, all these he's brought in these religious figures to make sure that they're making this movie, this perfect movie about the Christ. And there's differing opinions along all the religions, of course, of what that actually means. And they have this big argument about it. And the one who's really, really digging in on this is the rabbi. He's like, no, this is the way Christ should be, or whatever. And then finally Brolin gets down to brass tacks and he's like, so what do you think of how we're portraying it? And the guy's like, I've seen worse or whatever. And then the rabbi's like, I don't have an opinion. Then after all of that, he has no opinion. I love that one. The scene where Clooney is sitting there being lectured to by his kidnappers, and they're sitting there talking about economics and the body politic and history and all of that, never letting on they're communists. But if you're wise to what communists are, you kind of have an idea of what's going on. But that narration that Michael Gambon comes in with, and so Baird Whitlock found himself in the hands of communists. And I just love the fact that they just sat there and didn't say communist the entire time in that conversation. And then Michael Gambon comes in and just like, yeah, they're communists, by the way. I love his narration in general in this movie. Coen brothers do narration like no other. That Sailor musical number, No Dames, is very, very If the Lonely Island wrote show tunes in the 50s. It's pretty great. Sitting there like they're lamenting the fact that there's got to be no dames, but then, the guys start dancing together and like, hey, maybe this won't be so bad after all. I kind of wish that the movie had never, and I'm sure this is how they would have handled something. Maybe they wouldn't have handled something like that. I think a bartender coming in and saying, hey, this is not that kind of place, kind of ruins it a little bit for me. I wish there was nobody saying anything about it. Like, just let you be in on the joke and not say anything after that. That was I love that scene. And of course, Channing Tatum obviously has moves. Of course, I saw some behind the scenes thing. All of this stuff is done with wires and harnesses and stuff like that, because you don't want Channing Tatum to to do a handstand on the bar and then just suddenly slip and break his body for doing all of this and everything. So the other thing, Channing Tatum whipping his head back as the boat heads towards the submarine, that gave me a huge laugh. I love that a lot. Baird's great speech. You mentioned this. Baird's great speech in the movie, within the movie, where we see the crew getting moved by it. Like the guy in the lights is like, wait a minute, I don't have to just look at my lights and make sure my lights are okay. This is a performance right here. And then he ruins it by not remembering Faith at the end. And then here's another little aside. I thought it was very neat that the movie, I don't know if the Coen brothers did this on purpose, but it captures in a frame Christopher Lambert and Josh Brolin, both people married to Diane Lane in their lives. And obviously far enough apart that I don't think there was like any like ill will between the actors or anything like that. But just capturing two people who were married to the same person. And then, as I found out in the IMDb later, Diane Lane actually played the wife of Mannix in Hollywoodland, because Mannix is based on a real person. And so I thought that was a really cool thing too. And knowing the Coens, they probably knew all of that going in. So I'm assuming that was a thing. But anyway, yes, this now, I mean, like a lot of Coen Brothers movies, it vies for the top 10, doesn't it? It's just one of those that kind of, is it possible even that, to rank Coen Brothers movies anymore? Because it seems like every time you watch something anew, you got to reassess it. Like, where does this rank in their whole career and everything? Is this possibly a top 10er for them?
It's funny when I think of like ranking Coen brothers. I think I've used this metaphor before, but it's like when you get a pizza and it has 8 pieces. It's like ranking the 8 pieces of pizza. It's like, it's all so good. How do you distinguish, between what's technically that you like better or whatever? And I love that, this is late stage Coen, Inside Llewyn Davis, then Hail Caesar. Really kind of the last 2 technically full narrative films the Coens directed together. I mean, you have Buster Scruggs, but that was kind of a bunch of shorts that they put together that have a little thematic connection, but, it's a little different. I just wonder if Hail Caesar is the last like Coen Brothers written and directed movie we might see, because now they're kind of doing their own thing. I know Joel did... Yeah. The Macbeth, the tragedy of Macbeth, right? And then Ethan's been doing some stuff recently too. So yeah, it's interesting to me that we kind of feel like maybe those 20 movies are the Coen canon if you include Buster Scruggs, and it's wild.
And they've never come out and said why or anything like that. If it was just a kind of a like, I'm tired of something, or like one of them is tired of doing something, or if they're just tired of working together or whatever. Because it's amazing they've worked together this long. Because when you have that collaboration where somebody has an idea and that idea gets shot down, and if that idea gets shot down just enough, then you might start being like, well, I kind of want to do it my way at some point. And just what it looks like, But one thing before you go into your the frame of the film that gets burned in this thing. And by the way, Frances McDormand does have the little line of I shouldn't wear ties in this play. Yeah, exactly. That was a thing that was in projection you were told not to do. Like,
never have loose clothing. Yeah.
But the one thing that gave me a tremendous smile in this movie is that the film does burn indeed. And then they rewind it and gets her out and everything. And then she goes and resplices it. Now, when it comes through, this may be a thing that only like projectionists can see, but there was a brief blip of a burned frame that showed up on the
amazing
on the run back. And it gave me a tremendous smile, because that's what I was looking for when they ran it through.
Nice.
And it's just this and it's gone, and it's a beautiful little detail.
That's nice. I specifically threw that out there knowing you would know the actual, what happened.
Right.
So that's awesome to hear. Yeah, I love this movie so much. I love it even more this time through. Like I said, I love that late stage Cohen is, in my mind, as good, if not better, than some of early stage Cohen. Like, it just doesn't feel like they ever lost their fastball. This movie gives me such Hudsucker vibes sometimes, where, just quirky characters who you love to see what they're doing next, saying quirky lines. It gives me Barton Fink vibes at times, especially with the Hollywood stuff and some of the jokes. This is a straight screwball comedy at times, which I love. Like, they are really finding a way to capture what made some of those old movies really funny. That "Would That It Were So Simple" thing is a bit, the the guy moving the bottles in the No Dame song, there's just all these like bits that they're doing that are so fun. Even I mentioned even like the "Will he drink it" bit, that's like a classic movie bit, and they do it really, really well. So I really did this time through fall in love with the movies in the movie, Merrily We Dance, Lazy Old Moon. Like, they're aping all these kind of 50s films in this. I found a quote from Joel talking about Hail Caesar, and about how, they grew up watching these movies and loving them. And he said, we loved that stuff. We just didn't realize we were watching crap. And it's that kind of feel, like you're honoring these kind of lazy in some ways movies because they're just, taking a well-worn structure and putting a new face on it. So yeah, I found all that stuff really, really fun. Yes, you mentioned the "Would That It Were So Simple" is just, it should be taught in schools. It's just that good. And I love it, including the tag, "It's complicated" later. It's just so perfect.
Yes.
I laugh so hard. There are little moments that I caught this time through when Baird is saying, he says, "What if I just named names?" And everybody in the room leans forward and sits as if they know that's the phrase, naming names. It just made me laugh. And you look around the room with those communists and you're just like, is that Fisher Stevens? Yeah, that's just Fisher Stevens hanging out in the communist room. Or, who else was in there? Alex Karpovsky, who I see in all these things.
Hilarious little photographer thing where you just suddenly see a bulb flash and Clooney looks over and there's Karpovsky with this smile on his face, this evil smile on his face. Like, whatever you want to call that smile he had on his face was just amazing.
Patrick Fischler, who I've seen in a bunch of stuff, hanging out in there. And of course,
an all-timer.
David Krumholtz, just hanging out in the communist room, before his Oppenheimer resurgence.
There you go.
But yeah, just the fun stuff like that. Even his wife is played by Allison Pill, who, by the way, is the wife in Trap as well, which I found interesting. I mentioned, Wayne Knight being in there. Just so many of these faces that I know from other things, just doing fun, interesting stuff. I found that fascinating as well. Let's see. I think I'll go back to the No Dame song because I think it was one of my favorite parts the first time I watched it, and I think it may be vying with "Would That It Were" for my favorite part in the movie. Yeah. And it's not just because Channing Tatum is so talented, which he is. He's incredibly talented. But it's a really great reproduction of those big dance numbers. I love the part where the bartender's trying to clear the tables, and so he's moving the table sheets from under their feet as they're dancing one by one, and just stuff like that is really interesting and fun. And you mentioned the one part of it that I also had not necessarily an issue with, but I was kind of like, I think you could have left that unsaid. It gets at the end. I think there's like a dance move where he's standing between two guys thrusting back and forth, and then that kind of bar line.
Well, and considering the fact we're in the middle of the Hays Code stuff and everything, I don't think they would have even brought attention to any of this stuff.
Right.
Like even though the song is and the everything that's going on in the dance number is blatant, it doesn't go right out and say it at any moment. So
especially there's this one moment which I think is the perfect tag and the perfect level of subtlety, is the moment where all the other guys open the door and they see what's going on, and you're expecting the oh my goodness reaction, but they're like, hey, and they all join in. Like, this looks like fun in here, and it's just so perfect. I absolutely loved going through this movie again, and man, I hope they're not done, because like I said, I don't think they've lost their fastball together. But maybe it's just kind of people move on from stuff even when it stays good. It's just like we've had the Coen brothers for 20 movies. We kind of know what it is. I don't know, but fun stuff.
It's kind of, I mean, it's none of our business, but it's also sad when we don't know what's going on with these times. I always think about Gene Hackman. He's perfectly content to be a grandfather and just living life without being a movie star. But I'm always like, can somebody pry him out for one more movie before he goes off into the, wherever the hobbits go at the end of the movie? So, that's what I keep, hoping for, but it may never happen.
You kind of hold both of those thoughts of, all the best to them. They deserve it. Like, they don't owe anybody anything.
True.
And at the same time, how cool would it be to see Gene Hackman, come back for, one last
Gene Hackman
go at it.
in a Coen Brothers movie.
There you go. Let's do it. Greenlight it.
All right. Going on to our super secret double feature. So look, there's some very natural ones for this. If you're going to go Coen Brothers, Barton Fink would be a perfect one for this. They even mention the Capitol Studio or whatever in Barton Fink, with it. They end up that is the main studio in this movie. Barton Fink takes place in the 40s, and it's kind of leading up to this. So Barton Fink would be a perfectly good one. I wanted to sort of stretch away from the movie within a movie or the inside baseball type of thing of this. So even The Player came to mind. The Player would be a good one for this as well. But I ended up going with the era, and there are a lot of similarities between these movies. And I went with LA Confidential, which is the poster behind me as well. I think that with all the stuff, especially with the Danny DeVito photographer character and all the little scandals and everything that are going on in this movie, the hookers that are cut to look like movie stars. There's a lot of stuff in LA Confidential, even though it's a mystery thriller movie, and it doesn't blend itself well with this comedy that's in of Hail Caesar. The era itself, I kept thinking of LA Confidential during this movie, regardless, because LA Confidential takes place in the mid 50s, I think. And it's kind of I think if you wanted to have a double feature here, these would be two dynamite ones to go with, even though LA Confidential is not a, movie comedy of any sort, but I think it would do well. So there you go.
I agree. I think this is a great pick. In fact, you look at one thing we didn't talk about thematically, there's a lot of different storylines going on in Hail Caesar, but the primary, protagonist storyline is Eddie Mannix, and it is a noir storyline. The narration, the way it's shot, it's very noir. And so it fits perfectly with this idea of LA Confidential. So yeah, I think that's a great choice. Perfect choice.
All right. Let's go on to next week's homework. Okay. So guys, we've had enough fun here, haven't we? We've had a lot of laughs. We've had a lot of comedies, things like that in there. Be prepared not to laugh whatsoever with this one. This is a movie that I have loved for a while, but it's time to look at a revisit. It is 2001's The Pledge. And it has a 6.7 on the IMDb. I think that's probably about right for something like this. But in the middle of it, you have a terrific Jack Nicholson performance. This is directed by Sean Penn. So, of course, because it's directed by Sean Penn, it is almost humorless and it is bleak. But it is about a guy who has told a woman he will find the killer of her child. He will do this. And you know what? You can't doubt it when Jack Nicholson tells you that. So yes, be prepared for a debate on this one. This movie is not going to be for everybody, but yeah, Jetsmet says no laughing allowed. There is some actually. Now that I think about it, there are some funny moments in The Pledge. But Aaron Eckhart is in this one too, and you're going to be like, Aaron Eckhart's such a dick in this movie. But anyway, The Pledge is a movie that I've been wanting to revisit for a really long time, and I haven't been able to watch it in forever. So I would love to and just remember that I love this movie because it's one of those that you will debate with yourself for a really long time. Like, does he do the right thing in this movie? So.
So it's like a conundrum movie, kind of like you come away like thinking about what choices would have I made and those kind of things.
Exactly.
That's great. Yeah. I love those kind of movies.
And I take it you have not seen this one.
No, this is completely off my radar. Completely missed it. Didn't even. I don't know that I even knew it existed. So I'm really excited to check this out.
Yeah, this was a movie that it was one of the first times I quit Hollywood 27, which, there were a couple of those. This was the last movie I watched before the first time I quit from there. I remember watching this movie and then turning in my keys and everything, and then I was done working at Hollywood 27 for a while. But anyway, this is a great one. I can't wait to revisit it, and I can't wait to hear what you think about it.
Nice.
Well. Excited. I guess we got time for a question or two.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. What do we got here? Let's go with favorite war movie.
Favorite war movie? Complete sentence question.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I think I'm going to cheat on this one a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, but I mean, it's right there in the franchise's title. But I'm going with The Empire Strikes Back as my favorite war movie. Probably not What's Intended, and if we need to go What's Intended, we can.
You know what? Fuck What's Intended, Aaron.
Fair enough. I just really love Empire Strikes Back, and technically, it is a war movie.
Okay, good. Mine is going to be Apocalypse Now. I think this movie has grown on me so much over the years, and it seems like I find like a period of time to watch. Like it'll be like usually it seems like almost an annual tradition that I pop in Apocalypse Now and give it a whirl. And there's 3 different versions, so you can choose which one that you want to. I've grown to love the director's cut, the final director's cut of this movie. But it's one of those that just has built and built and built. And I know that, Saving Private Ryan and a lot of movies in the past are like, they're going to be most people's favorites. And Apocalypse Now is not like, it's going to be a popular choice. I'm not going to say that it's not, a lot of people wouldn't say that, but there's just something about that particular movie that just puts me in a different kind of mood and different. I feel like it's one of the best that's ever been.
It's really good, and I only watched it recently for the first time, and I forget which. There's a couple cuts of this, right? Like, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. There's the original theatrical, which is like a 2.5 hour movie. Mm-hmm. And then he came out with Redux, which was like a 4-hour version, and then he came out with the director's cut when the 4K stuff came out. That's 3 hours. So
that's the one I've seen.
I've actually never seen Redux. I've never seen the 4-hour version.
Yeah, I think I saw the director's cut, the most recent one, and was blown away by it. I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over in the chat, Jets Mets and Nick Jagged both said 1917 at about the same time. Yeah, 1917 is good. I haven't revisited 1917 in a while. But I remember really, really liking it. Of course, it's, I saw a thing with Tarantino breaking it down the other day where he laments the hidden cuts that are in 1917. He's like, are you really doing continuous cut then, if that's the case, where you have a hidden cut? And Tarantino's like, you can't cheat whatsoever in these movies, or else it doesn't have the same effect.
Well, can I explore that just a second? That's a really interesting debate, because what Tarantino is saying, if he's saying like, quit hiding the cuts, do it for real, he's saying that the movie making is part of the quality of the movie made. So in other words, the effort you're putting into making the movie is part of the thing to consider whether a movie's good. I don't think I agree with that. I think it's what's on the screen. But
I don't either. And somebody as well versed as Tarantino, it's hard to disagree with him on those things all the time. But yeah, I do disagree with him there, because the effect is, if you didn't see them, and maybe he sees the hidden cuts, that's a possibility. I mean, I just told you that I saw the little blip frame and the thing there, so maybe he sees them. But I never see them when they have hidden cuts. But they said he was the Robert Rodriguez took him to task on this during Sin City. Because Rodriguez is using nothing but green screens and everything all the way through this, and special effects. And Tarantino wanted to shoot his section without any assists whatsoever. He ended up having to, because this is the way the movie was set up. Yeah. But Rodriguez is like, we're all making make believe here. What do you say? What do you mean we're cheating? And so like they have that same argument.
I mean, I can respect it. Like when I found out that was it in Revenant where Inarritu did all natural light. They did no lighting on that movie. Yeah, that was all natural light in that movie.
Yeah,
like I can respect it, and I get the intent. The intent is like the naturalism or whatever. But at the same time, if I saw the same exact movie and they had used artificial light, I don't know that the difference matters to me as far as the quality of the film. So yeah.
Continuing on in the chat, Nick Jagged also says Star Wars. Slab says Tropic Thunder, which I believe was Jeremy's answer if we had gotten to this question.
Yep.
I think it's an excellent. I mean, even though it's a comedy about making a movie about war or whatever, I think it's a good war movie too. WTFG says Dr. Strangelove. That's a great
choice.
Yeah. Even though there's like not much war on the screen, it's a good war movie. It's very, very good. Nick says Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, also technically a war movie. Okay, all right. Slab says can't help but nobody has said The Thin Red Line. That's true. That was a big recommend. We should have come up with that. Slab also says Apocalypse Now. Castro says Alex Garland's Civil War was good. Yeah, it was. And then let's see, anything else? Okay. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Once again, chat, thanks for coming out and bringing it today. Appreciate you guys coming out. Next week is going to be The Pledge, and I can't wait to dive into that, especially since Aaron hasn't seen it. So that'll be really, really cool. It'll be good to hear what you guys think of it as well. All right, so that's going to do it for this week. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.